Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Monday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Jun-sok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good to have you back on.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks in New York ended last week on a high note. Here in Seoul, the KOSPI and the KOSDAQ strongly higher as well today. What's the story in the global markets and in Korea?
Okay, well, the U.S. indices started rising on Wednesday, U.S. time, and they have been rising on Friday, but they're still really a lot below the highs that we saw on early September. So it seems like they've readjusted a bit, and now they're going to start on the upward path again. But it might be slower than it was last time because I think there's more awareness that there is a disconnect between the real economy and the stock market, and the presidential elections as well as the congressional elections are coming up in slightly more than a month. So that may also act as sort of a weight on the stock market. Now, the other international markets were really mixed. It seems like there's no real thrust, either upward or downward in the market. So it seems like it's being affected by minor factors, minor hopes, like hopefully there will be a coronavirus, but it seems like it's being affected by this and that more than anything else. The European indices were mixed at the end of last week. CAC and DAX were heading downward, while FTSE and Euro 50 were rising upwards. In the Asian markets, Nikkei was rising very sharply toward the end of last week, and it rose today as well. Shanghai was falling, though it's rising currently today. Hong Kong is rising slightly at the end of last week and today. KOSPI and KOSDAQ, well, they started the recovery after some large falls last week. They started recovery on last Thursday. It went up quite a bit today. KOSPI went up by 1.29%, KOSDAQ by 3.42%, and somewhat unusual in on the days when we have a rising index, individuals sold rather than bought today.
Interesting point there. Now, we just heard a story about the Trump administration banning effectively American companies from sending technology to China's biggest chipmaker, SMIC. This could have benefits for South Korean chipmakers. What do you make of this story, Professor?
Okay, well, there is a potential. In 2019, only 16% of semiconductors used in China were actually produced in China, and China did recognize the low production within the country as one of the weaknesses. So in their 2025 manufacturing plan, they were trying to raise the percentage of semiconductors produced in China up to 70%, and SMIC was China's big attempt to increase domestic production. It's the largest foundry operation in China, and 60% of its sales were going to China and Hong Kong. But still, it does reflect the behindness of Chinese semiconductor technology. Apparently, half of SMIC manufacturing equipment is imported from the United States, so this technology ban will hurt SMIC quite a bit. And SMIC is behind Samsung and Taiwan's TSMC in terms of technology. So this will hurt the firm definitely, but they may still be able to supply lower technology chips to the Chinese firms which need semiconductors. SMIC accounts for about 4.5% of the global foundry market compared to 53.9% for TSMC and 17.4% for Samsung. So even if SMIC is placed out of the market, it probably will mean some gains for Samsung. Qualcomm of the United States apparently were looking at Samsung and TSMC to take over some of their chip production from SMIC, but President Trump is putting more and more firms on the blacklist, more and more Chinese firms on the blacklist. So it remains to be seen whether the cut in Korea's exports to China will outweigh this additional demand that comes from non-Chinese firms that seeks replacement for SMIC. But right now, it looks like it'll be a wash.
Got it. Well, it's the start of a new week, Professor, though most of it will be a holiday here in Korea. Still, what's on your radar this week?
Okay, because it's a holiday, there's not that much statistics coming out in Korea. The most interesting one is probably going to be the August industrial activities report, but because it reports activities in August, it's probably too far behind the times because of the coronavirus. Things are moving very rapidly. September business sentiment index and economic sentiment index is also coming up. That will probably be more interesting. That'll give a state of mind on how firms and consumers feel about the current economy. Foreign statistics, the most interesting one is going to be U.S. unemployment rate and wage data, because this will be the last unemployment rate that will be revealed before the United States presidential elections. But likely anti-Trump side and pro-Trump side, both sides will see what it wants to see. On the anti-Trump side, employment will still be at a historically low level. The economy will not recover by this month. But the pro-Trump side will probably see that, it did fall considerably because of the coronavirus, but U.S. has been making up jobs rather rapidly in the last few months. So both sides will see probably what they want to see.
Got it. All right, Professor, thanks so much for coming on today. Have a safe and happy holiday.
Thank you, and have a nice Chuseok.